Tycoon thought his wife was infertile, returns to find her living luxuriously with triplets. "My lady, please try to smile," whispered Minji, her most loyal servant since childhood. "It is bad luck to enter marriage with tears threatening to fall." Seoyun met her own gaze in the polished bronze mirror. At 20 years old, her beauty was undeniable. Porcelain skin, almond-shaped eyes that betrayed intelligence far greater than she was permitted to display, and lips that had barely known genuine laughter in recent months. "How can I smile when I am being traded like a prized mare?" she whispered, careful that her words wouldn't travel beyond the silk screens of her chamber. "My father's debts for my womb. That is the transaction taking place today." Outside, the sounds of festivities grew louder. The House of Kim had spared no expense for this union. Lord Ji-ho, at 32, was the wealthiest merchant in the eastern provinces, a man who had transformed his family's modest trading business into an empire that rivaled the royal treasury. His ships sailed to lands beyond imagination, returning with silk, spices, and gold. Lord Ji-ho could have chosen any noble daughter, Minji reminded her gently. "He chose you specifically, my lady, because my family's name still carries weight at court, even if our coffers are empty," Seoyun replied bitterly. "He buys respectability with this marriage. I buy my family's survival." The door slid open, revealing her father, once proud Lord Seo, now stooped with the shame of bankruptcy and desperate hope that this alliance would restore their family's standing. "Daughter," he said, his voice a mixture of command and plea. "It is time." Lord Ji-ho stood impassively at the altar. His broad shoulders draped in the finest silk robes dyed the deep blue reserved for nobility. His eyes, calculating, dark, and revealing nothing, scanned the assembled guests. Ministers, merchants, and minor nobility had gathered, moths to the flame of his wealth and influence. "She is quite beautiful," whispered his advisor, Park, a thin man whose loyalty had been purchased years ago. "The Seo family may have fallen on hard times, but their bloodline remains impeccable." Ji-ho barely acknowledged the comment. "Beauty fades. I need sons, Park. Heirs to ensure what I've built doesn't crumble when I'm gone." "Of course, my lord. And connections at court that even your gold cannot buy." When Seoyun entered, walking with measured steps that her mother had rehearsed with her 1,000 times, Ji-ho felt an unexpected stirring. She carried herself with dignity that money couldn't purchase. Her eyes, lowered appropriately, still somehow conveyed defiance. Interesting, he thought. At least she has spirit. The ceremony proceeded according to tradition. Vows were exchanged, cups of rice wine shared, and blessings offered. Not once did their eyes truly meet. Not once did their hands touch beyond what ritual demanded. That night, in the bridal chamber adorned with symbols of fertility and prosperity, Seoyun sat on the edge of the massive bed, trembling slightly despite her determination to show strength. The door slid open, and Ji-ho entered, having dismissed the ribald wedding party with uncharacteristic abruptness. "My lord husband," she said, the words foreign and cold on her tongue. Ji-ho studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Let us understand each other, Lady Seoyun. I did not marry for love, nor did you. I require an heir and the respectability your family name provides. You require financial security and restoration of your family's position." Her eyes finally lifted to meet his. "You speak with admirable directness." "I despise pretense," he replied. "In business, clear terms make for successful ventures. And is that what this is? A business venture?" A flash of that defiance he glimpsed earlier. Ji-ho unexpectedly found himself appreciating her courage. "The most important one of my life, the continuation of everything I've built." He moved to pour 2 cups of wine from a jade decanter. Handing one to her, he continued, "I will not be cruel to you. You will want for nothing material. This estate is now your domain to manage. I spend most days overseeing my trading companies." Seoyun accepted the wine, her fingers careful not to touch his. "And in return, I am to provide you with sons. Sons who will inherit the largest merchant fortune in the kingdom." He took a measured sip. Is that arrangement so terrible? Compared to what might have befallen you had your family continued its decline? Painful truth. Without this marriage, her father might have sold her to a less scrupulous older man or worse. No, she admitted softly. It is not terrible, but neither is it what I dreamed of as a child. Something almost human flickered across Jiho's stern features. Dreams rarely survive contact with reality, my lady. But perhaps we might find, if not affection, then mutual respect. She raised her cup slightly. To mutual respect, then. The autumn wind scattered crimson leaves across the courtyard as Seo Yoon sat with her mother-in-law, Lady Kim, for their weekly tea ritual. Though the older woman's smile remained fixed, her words had grown increasingly barbed with each passing moon. My son's ships returned from the southern islands yesterday, Lady Kim remarked, her wrinkled fingers tapping impatiently against her porcelain cup. Another successful venture. Jiho has doubled the family fortune since your marriage. He is a shrewd businessman, Seo Yoon replied carefully. The kingdom has never seen his equal in trade. Lady Kim's eyes narrowed. Indeed, he excels at everything he attempts. The unspoken accusation hung in the air between them. Everything except producing an heir with you. More tea, honorable mother? Seo Yoon offered, desperate to change the subject. No. Lady Kim set down her cup with a decisive click. What I require is not tea, daughter-in-law, but grandchildren. The Kim family line has continued unbroken for 12 generations. Each wife has provided sons within the first year of marriage. Seo Yoon felt heat rising to her cheeks. I assure you, honorable mother, that I pray daily at the temple for prayers. Lady Kim scoffed. Prayers without results are merely wasted breath. Perhaps you are not using the proper positions after relations with my son? Or perhaps your diet lacks the necessary elements for fertility. Mother-in-law, The servants tell me my son visited your chambers only twice last month. Lady Kim continued mercilessly. How can you conceive when he spends more nights poring over ledgers than with his wife? Before Seo Yoon could respond, a servant appeared at the doorway, bowing deeply. My ladies, Lord Jiho has returned early from his warehouse inspection. He requests Lady Seo Yoon's presence in his study immediately. Seo Yoon rose quickly, grateful for the interruption despite the unusual summons. She bowed to her mother-in-law. Please excuse me, honorable mother. Lady Kim's voice followed her like a winter chill. Remember, child, a barren branch is the first to be pruned from the family tree. Jiho's study smelled of ink, parchment, and foreign spices. Maps covered one wall, ledgers another. He stood with his back to her when she entered, staring out the window at the ships in the distant harbor. You requested my presence, husband? Seo Yoon asked, keeping her voice steady despite the lingering humiliation from her mother-in-law's words. He turned, and she was struck by the exhaustion evident in his face. Dark circles underlined his eyes. New lines had formed at their corners. Success was extracting its price. Minister Choi visited my warehouse today, Jiho said without preamble, to discuss taxes, ostensibly. But his true purpose became clear when he asked why the Kim family had not announced a pregnancy. Seo Yoon's hands clenched in the folds of her silk hanbok. I see. Do you? Jiho approached his desk, lifting a scroll. He reminded me that merchant families, no matter how wealthy, require noble sons to secure their position. That without an heir, all I build could be seized by the crown upon my death. The unspoken blame settled on her shoulders. Seo Yoon lifted her chin. And what did you tell him? That my affairs are my own. Jiho's voice was clipped. But he is not wrong. 2 years, Seo Yoon. 2 years, and your womb remains empty. Something inside her, pride, perhaps, or simply accumulated hurt, finally cracked. And how often do you visit that womb, my lord husband? Once a month when your busy schedule permits? When you are not exhausted from counting coins or negotiating with foreign merchants? Surprise flickered across his face at her outburst. In 2 years, she had never raised her voice. "You forget yourself," he warned. "No, I remember myself all too well. The daughter of noble house CEO, married to bring prestige to merchant wealth, expected to produce heirs without complaint while being treated as little more than decorative furniture in this household." Jiho slammed his hand on the desk. "I have provided you with every luxury, except your presence." The words escaped before she could contain them. "Except your time, your conversation. Anything that might make this arrangement more than a cold transaction." Silence fell between them. Jiho studied her as if seeing her for the first time. Her flushed cheeks, bright eyes, the elegant curve of her neck when she held herself with such dignity. "I did not realize," he began, then stopped, uncomfortable with the territory of emotions. "My business requires—" "I understand what your business requires," she interrupted, surprising them both again. "But an heir requires more than occasional dutiful visits to my bed. The physician says stress and distance can prevent conception. Perhaps if we were to—" She faltered, unable to finish the thought. Jiho's expression shifted subtly. "What are you suggesting?" Seo-yoon gathered her courage. "That perhaps we might try to know each other, to share meals regularly, to make this marriage more than a contract." For a long moment he didn't respond. The tension in the room thickened until Seo-yoon feared she had overstepped irrevocably. Finally, Jiho spoke. "My mother has arranged for the royal physician to examine you next week." The blood drained from her face. Royal physicians were known for their painful, humiliating examinations of noblewomen who failed to conceive. "Is that necessary?" she whispered. "It is decided," he said, turning back to his ledgers. "If there is a physical reason for this failure, we must know it. My legacy cannot wait forever." As she left his study, legs trembling beneath her composed exterior, Seo-yoon felt the first real fear for her position. 2 years without an heir was concerning. 3 would be dangerous. And in the quiet corners of the estate, she had already heard whispers that Lord Jiho's cousins were suggesting suitable secondary wives from their families. Dr. Kong was older than she expected, his beard streaked with gray, eyes sharp beneath bushy brows. He unpacked his instruments methodically, the clinking of metal against metal making Seo-yoon's stomach clench. "I will need to examine you thoroughly, my lady," he said without warmth. "The questions I ask must be answered truthfully, no matter how intimate." Seo-yoon nodded, her mouth too dry for words. "Has your monthly cycle been regular?" he demanded, fingers hovering over acupuncture needles. "Yes, physician. Every 28 days without fail." He made a dismissive sound. "And during your relations with Lord Jiho, do you experience pain?" Heat flooded her face. "No. Pleasure." His eyebrow raised, the question clearly meant to embarrass. Seo-yoon hesitated. How could she describe those mechanical encounters? "Our relations are proper." Dr. Kang's lips thinned. "I see. And does Lord Jiho complete the act fully within you?" She closed her eyes briefly. "Yes." The examination that followed left her dignity in shreds. Questions about bodily functions, painful prodding of her abdomen, the collection of various fluids. Each indignity piled upon the last until tears threatened. But she would not cry before this man. She held onto her composure like a drowning person clutching driftwood. When it was done, Dr. Kong washed his hands in a porcelain basin while Seo-yoon's handmaiden Minji helped her dress, whispering words of comfort that did little to ease the humiliation. "You may inform Lord Jiho that I will speak with him privately," Dr. Kong announced, packing away his implements. "Might I not hear your findings as well?" Seo-yoon asked, her voice steadier than she felt. His gaze reflected something she couldn't quite name. Satisfaction? "It is customary to inform the husband first in these matters. You will know soon enough." Jiho received Dr. Kong in his formal audience chamber, seated behind a low table laden with documents requiring his attention. He had abandoned his work the moment the physician was announced, though he maintained an appearance of casual interest rather than the consuming anxiety he actually felt. After formal greetings and tea was served, Jiho's patience evaporated. "Your diagnosis, physician," Is there a treatment required? Dr. Kong set down his cup with deliberate slowness. Lord Ji-ho, I have examined many noblewomen in my 30 years of service to the palace. What I must tell you is difficult. Something cold settled in Ji-ho's stomach. Speak plainly. Your wife's womb is inhospitable to life. The signs are clear. Her internal heat is insufficient, her channels blocked. Dr. Kang's tone was clinical, devoid of compassion. Lady Seo-yoon will never bear children. The words fell like stones into still water, ripples of implication expanding outward. Never, Ji-ho repeated, the single word feeling foreign on his tongue. I would stake my reputation on it. There are remedies we might try, costly herbs from the northern mountains, acupuncture treatments, but they would merely be an exercise in futility. Ji-ho stood abruptly, moving to the window. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, pattering against the garden stones. You are certain of this? Completely. And if I may speak boldly, my lord. Go on. Dr. Kong lowered his voice conspiratorially. I am aware of certain political sensitivities. Lady Seo-yoon's father still holds influence at court despite his financial troubles. But there are ways to dissolve a marriage without causing undue embarrassment to either family. Ji-ho turned, his expression hardening. You overstep, physician. Forgive me. Dr. Kong bowed, though his eyes remained calculating. I merely sought to offer complete counsel. A man of your stature requires heirs. The law permits second wives in cases of proven infertility. Later, after Dr. Kong had departed with a heavy purse of silver, Ji-ho sat alone in the growing darkness. No servants dared enter to light the lamps. The rain had intensified, matching his turbulent thoughts. Baron. The word echoed in his mind. All his wealth, his ships, his trading empire. What purpose did they serve without a son to inherit? The Seo name had brought him the court connections he needed, but at what cost? A soft knock interrupted his brooding. Without waiting for permission, So-yoon entered, a paper lantern casting her face in gentle light and shadow. Have you spoken with Dr. Kong? She asked, her voice barely audible above the rain. Ji-ho didn't turn to face her. I have. And his verdict? The silence stretched between them, populated by raindrops and unspoken grief. He says you cannot bear children, Ji-ho finally answered, his voice stripped of emotion. That your womb will never quicken with life. Seo-yoon's sharp intake of breath was the only indication of her distress. When she spoke, her voice trembled slightly. There must be other opinions we could seek. Other physicians. To what end? Ji-ho interrupted. To spend more time and resources pursuing what cannot be? You accept his word so easily? A note of desperation entered her voice. One examination, and you condemn me? Something in her tone made him turn at last. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with an intensity that momentarily unsettled him. Dr. Kong is the royal physician, he said flatly. His judgment is beyond question. Is it? She challenged. Or do you simply find it convenient to believe him? Perhaps you've been seeking a reason to... Enough! The word cracked like thunder. What would you have me do? My family line ends with me if I have no son. Everything I've built crumbles to dust when I die. Tears welled in her eyes but didn't fall. And what of me? What becomes of me now? The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither wished to face. Ji-ho found himself unable to meet her gaze. You will continue as my wife in name, he said finally. You will maintain your position and privileges. Your family's honor will remain intact. But, she prompted, hearing the unspoken condition. Ji-ho's jaw tightened. But I must secure my lineage. The law permits a second wife, she finished for him, her voice hollow, or a concubine. Someone to provide what I apparently cannot. He said nothing, which was answer enough. Seo-yoon straightened her shoulders, gathering dignity around herself like armor. I see. Then I shall remove myself to the eastern chambers permanently, to make room for whoever you choose to fulfill my duty. She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. Did it never occur to you, husband, that perhaps the problem does not lie with me? That in all your certainty, you might be mistaking convenience for truth? Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of plum blossoms and a strange, unsettled feeling in his chest. That night, as lightning illuminated the sky and thunder shook the estate's foundations, servants whispered that they heard Lady So-yoon weeping. But by morning, her face was composed again, a perfect mask of acceptance that revealed nothing of the devastation within. Ji-ho immersed himself in his trading company, often leaving before dawn and returning well after midnight. On the rare occasions he and So-yoon occupied the same room, they exchanged only the most necessary courtesies, their words as carefully measured as valuable spices on a merchant's scale. Spring arrived with a perfunctory display of cherry blossoms that seemed to mock the coldness within the Kim household. On one such morning, as petals drifted like pink snow across the courtyard, So-yoon was summoned to the main hall, an unusual request that sent her handmaiden into a flurry of preparation. "Your finest hanbok, my lady," Min-ji insisted, selecting a garment of deep jade silk embroidered with silver cranes. "Lord Ji-ho has called a family assembly." So-yoon's hands stilled as she was applying rice powder to her face. "A family assembly? Did the messenger say why?" Min-ji avoided her eyes. "No, my lady, but there are rumors." "There are always rumors," So-yoon sighed. "What is it this time?" "The harbormaster's son says Lord Ji-ho has been preparing his largest ships for a long voyage, and Lady Kim has been seen consulting with matchmakers from prominent families." The powder brush clattered onto the table. "I see," So-yoon whispered, feeling the ground shift beneath her once more. "Help me dress, Min-ji. Whatever comes, I will face it with dignity." The main hall had been arranged formally, with Ji-ho seated on an elevated platform at one end. His mother sat to his right, her thin lips curved in what might generously be called a smile. Various cousins, uncles, and business associates filled the room, their curious eyes following So-yoon as she entered and took her place at the left of her husband, the traditional position of a first wife. Ji-ho didn't acknowledge her arrival. Instead, he waited for the murmuring to subside before speaking, his voice firm and carrying to every corner of the hall. "I have called you here to announce an important decision regarding the future of the Kim trading empire," he began, his gaze sweeping over the assembled family members. "As you know, our business has expanded to include trade routes to China, the island kingdoms, and beyond. However, our competitors grow more aggressive, and opportunities are being missed due to the distance between our headquarters and these foreign markets." He paused, allowing his words to settle. "Therefore, I have decided to relocate temporarily to Hangzhou, where I will establish a new branch of our trading house. The expedition will last no less than 3 years." Murmurs erupted throughout the hall. 3 years was an extraordinary absence, almost unheard of for a man of Ji-ho's position. So-yoon felt the blood drain from her face but kept her expression carefully neutral, even as she sensed the weight of many eyes upon her. "My most trusted captains and advisors will accompany me," Ji-ho continued. "Construction has already begun on a compound in the foreign quarter of Hangzhou. We depart in 7 days." Lady Kim spoke up, her voice carrying a note of practiced concern. "And what of your household here, my son? Who will oversee your interests while you are abroad?" Ji-ho nodded, as though the question had been expected. "Uncle Sung-min will manage the local operations. Cousin Tae-jun will oversee the household accounts." His eyes finally slid towards So-yoon, though they seemed to look through her rather than at her. "As for other matters," the pause was deliberate, cruel in its calculated effect. "It has become clear that certain expectations of my marriage cannot be fulfilled." Ji-ho's voice remained even, businesslike, as though discussing a failed investment rather than his wife's humiliation. "Therefore, while abroad, I will be considering suitable arrangements for the continuation of the Kim family line." Gasps and hurried whispers filled the room. So-yoon's nails dug into her palms through the silk of her sleeves, the physical pain a welcome distraction from the public shaming. Lady Kim nodded approvingly. The matchmaker has provided several promising candidates from noble Chinese families. A well-placed alliance could expand our trading rights considerably. Indeed, Jiho agreed. Practical considerations must take precedence over sentiment. Xiao Yun could remain silent no longer. With every eye in the room upon her, she somehow found her voice. May I inquire, husband, what role you envision for me during your extended absence? The question emerged with remarkable steadiness, betraying none of the hurricane of emotions within. An uncomfortable silence fell. Such direct questioning from a wife, especially in a formal assembly, violated every convention of propriety. Jiho's expression hardened. You will maintain your position as mistress of this household, overseeing the domestic staff and fulfilling ceremonial duties as required. I see. Xiao Yun inclined her head slightly. And upon your return with a new bride? What then? The challenge in her question was unmistakable. Several elder relatives shifted uncomfortably. That, Jiho replied coldly, will depend on how gracefully you accept the natural order of things. A primary wife who cannot fulfill her essential purpose must make way for those who can. The words struck like physical blows. Xiao Yun felt as though she might shatter into 1,000 pieces, yet somehow remained outwardly composed. A porcelain doll with a heart of breaking glass. I have always understood my purpose, husband, she replied, her voice soft yet carrying to every corner of the silent room. Perhaps better than you understand yours. I wonder if your ships can sail far enough to escape that realization. Audible gasps punctuated her response. Even Lady Kim appeared momentarily stunned by such boldness. Jiho's face darkened with anger. You forget yourself, wife. No, Xiao Yun countered, rising smoothly to her feet. For the first time since our marriage, I remember myself clearly. I am Xiao Yun of the ancient house of Xiao, daughter of scholars and ministers who served the throne when your ancestors were still peddling fish in village markets. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Jiho stood abruptly, towering over her. You will retire to your chambers, he ordered through clenched teeth. Now, Xiao Yun bowed with exquisite formality, the movement containing neither submission nor respect. As you wish, husband. I shall await news of your safe arrival in China. Perhaps distance will grant you the clarity that proximity has denied you. She turned and walked from the hall, back straight, steps measured, feeling the weight of every stunned gaze. Only when she reached the sanctuary of her private chamber did she allow the mask to fall, collapsing to her knees as sobs wrenched from her throat. Minji rushed to her side, gathering her mistress in her arms like a child. What will become of me? Xiao Yun whispered between ragged breaths. When he returns with a new wife, young, fertile, everything I apparently am not, what place will remain for me? Minji stroked her hair, murmuring soothing words that offered little real comfort. Both women knew the likely outcome. Relegation to forgotten quarters of the estate, a living ghost in her own home, watching another woman bear the children she had dreamed of. That night, as servants throughout the compound whispered about the shocking confrontation, Xiao Yun made a decision. If abandonment was to be her fate, she would face it on her terms. She would not spend 3 years withering under her mother-in-law's triumphant gaze. She summoned writing materials and, with a steady hand, began composing letters to her father, to distant cousins who had remained loyal, to contacts who might still respect the Xiao name. If Jiho sought to sail away from their failed marriage, she would find her own course through the storm he had left behind. When dawn broke, Xiao Yun had not slept, but her eyes were dry and clear. Something had hardened within her, not in cruelty, but in resolve. The ships would sail in 7 days, carrying her husband to foreign shores and new possibilities. Xiao Yun did not come to bid him farewell. Lady Kim made a point of mentioning this breach of protocol as she clutched her son's sleeve for what might be the last time. Your wife's absence disrespects not only you but our entire household. Perhaps while you're gone, I shall have time to teach her proper obedience. Jiho gently extricated himself from his mother's grip. Focus on your health, mother. The physician warned against agitating yourself. My health would improve if I had grandchildren to dote upon, she replied sharply. Jiho's expression darkened. A matter I intend to remedy. Farewell, mother. I will send word when we reach Hangzhou. As his ship pulled away from the harbor, cutting through gray waters toward the distant horizon, Jiho found himself staring back at the diminishing shoreline longer than necessary. The rain obscured his final view of home, turning it into a smudged, indistinct memory. Much like the image of Xiaoyun's face that he carried with him, though he would not acknowledge this even to himself. Summer arrived with staggering heat, unlike anything the region had experienced in living memory. Fields withered, wells ran low, and tempers frayed throughout the province. In the Kim household, Xiaoyun had established an uneasy peace with Lady Kim, each woman keeping to her designated territory within the estate. The older woman made no secret of corresponding with potential matchmakers in China, leaving letters conspicuously visible when Xiaoyun passed. The first signs of trouble came from the village beyond the estate walls, reports of children with high fevers and strange rashes. Within days, similar symptoms appeared among the household staff. Fever that burned like fire, angry red spots that spread across the skin, and a deep, rattling cough that seemed to tear at the lungs. By the second week, village elders were burning incense at crossroads, praying to ancestral spirits for intervention. The royal physician sent from the capital took one look at the afflicted, pronounced it miasma from the fetid summer air, prescribed expensive herbs that did nothing, and promptly returned to the safety of the palace. Xiaoyun watched with growing concern as the number of sick increased daily. When Minji collapsed during morning duties, her skin burning to the touch, Xiaoyun made a decision. She unlocked a cedar chest hidden in the false bottom of her wardrobe and withdrew several books, ancient medical texts she had secretly purchased from traveling merchants over the months since her marriage. Reading such works was forbidden to women, but Xiaoyun had always found refuge in knowledge, even dangerous knowledge. "My lady," croaked Minji from her sickbed as Xiaoyun examined the rash spreading across her handmaiden's chest. "You shouldn't touch me. The sickness?" "Hush now," Xiaoyun replied, her fingers gentle as they pressed against Minji's neck, feeling for swelling. "I've been reading about similar outbreaks in the southern provinces. This isn't miasma. It's spread by contact, but I believe I know how to help." Minji's eyes widened. "The forbidden books? If Lady Kim discovers—" "She won't," Xiaoyun interrupted, already grinding herbs in a small mortar. "Because you'll recover and so will others. The old palace physician who treated my mother before she died taught me more than he should have. Between his lessons and these texts, I may save lives that would otherwise be lost." Later that night, Xiaoyun summoned the estate steward, a practical man who valued results over tradition. "The sickness is spreading faster than we can contain it," she told him, her voice steady despite the fear clutching at her heart. "I need a separate building. The old storage house by the eastern wall would do, where I can treat the worst cases." The steward hesitated. "Lady Kim has ordered the sick servants dismissed from service. She fears contagion. And where will they go? To die in ditches? To spread this disease further?" Xiaoyun squared her shoulders. "I am still the first wife of Lord Jiho. In his absence, my authority in household matters stands. Lady Kim will oppose—" "Let her," Xiaoyun interrupted, a new steel in her voice. "I will bear the consequences. Now, have the storage house cleared and cleaned with vinegar water by morning." Within days, Xiaoyun's improvised hospital housed 15 of the sickest servants. She worked tirelessly, brewing teas of willow bark to reduce fevers, applying poultices of specific herbs to draw out inflammation, and insisting on strict cleanliness. All practices detailed in her forbidden medical texts. Minji, now recovering, became her chief assistant. Together they established routines for changing bedding, disposing of soiled materials, and ensuring every caretaker washed thoroughly between patients. Word spread beyond the estate walls. Desperate villagers began appearing at the gates, carrying sick children or supporting elderly relatives. Xiaoyun could not turn them away. "You're exhausting yourself," Minji warned as Xiaoyun entered her third day without proper rest. "And Lady Kim is furious. She says you're bringing shame to the household by acting as a common healer. Seo-yoon barely looked up from grinding medicines. Let her be angry. I cannot watch people die when I might help them live. The inevitable confrontation came on the 10th day. Seo-yoon was demonstrating to village women how to prepare a preventative tea when Lady Kim appeared at the makeshift hospital, a scented handkerchief pressed to her nose. This ends now, the older woman announced, her voice trembling with outrage. You have transformed my son's respectable home into a peasant infirmary. The smell alone is the smell of illness being fought rather than surrendered to. So-yoon interrupted, continuing to measure herbs. These people are recovering, Lady Kim. The methods are working. It is unseemly. A woman of your position. My position. Seo-yoon finally looked up, her exhaustion momentarily overtaken by anger. My position is precarious at best, as you remind me daily with your matchmaking letters left about. If I am to be replaced, let me at least accomplish something of value before I am discarded. Lady Kim's face flushed. You dare speak to me so? When my son returns. When he returns, he can judge my actions himself. Until then. Seo-yoon's retort was cut short as Lady Kim suddenly swayed, her hand flying to her forehead. Seo-yoon was at her side instantly, supporting her weight. How long have you felt unwell? Unhand me? Lady Kim protested weakly, but her knees buckled as she spoke. Min-ji, prepare the private room, Seo-yoon called out, already examining the older woman's flushed face, and send for her personal maid to bring night clothes. I will not stay in this charnel house, Lady Kim whispered, though the fight was leaving her voice. You have the fever, Seo-yoon said simply, and the early rash on your neck. You cannot return to the main house and risk spreading this further. Fear flickered across Lady Kim's face, the first genuine emotion Seo-yoon had ever witnessed in her mother-in-law beyond disdain. Will I die? The question emerged small and frightened, stripped of pretense. Seo-yoon's voice softened. Not if I can help it. The messenger arrived from the royal palace as summer's heat finally began to wane. He bore not just a letter but a formal proclamation, and insisted on reading it aloud before the assembled household. By decree of His Royal Majesty, the messenger intoned, it is hereby acknowledged that Lady Seo-yoon of the House of Kim has rendered extraordinary service during the recent epidemic. Through her knowledge and tireless efforts, many lives were saved, including those of the royal cousin and his immediate family. The Crown recognizes this service with the honorary title of Compassionate Lady of the Realm and a grant of royal lands adjacent to the Kim estate. Murmurs of astonishment rippled through the assembled staff. Seo-yoon, thinner now from weeks of exhausting work but standing straight, received the sealed document with appropriate formality. His Majesty further inquires, the messenger continued more quietly, whether the Lady Seo-yoon would consider sharing her medical knowledge with the royal physicians, as the treatments she developed proved more effective than conventional methods. When the messenger had departed, Lady Kim approached her daughter-in-law. The older woman had survived her illness, though it had left her weakened and humbled. The weeks of depending on Seo-yoon's care had transformed their relationship in ways neither had anticipated. The royal lands, Lady Kim said softly, they border the western fields. Those have always been the most fertile part of our holdings. Seo-yoon nodded, uncertain where this was leading. My son will be pleased, Lady Kim continued, her voice strangely gentle. When he returns, he will find his wife has brought honor to our house in unexpected ways. If he returns to me at all, Seo-yoon replied, the pain of his abandonment still fresh despite the months that had passed. Lady Kim studied her for a long moment. I have not sent a letter to the matchmakers in Hangzhou for some time. Seo-yoon's eyes widened slightly, questioning. Perhaps, the older woman continued carefully, I was hasty in my judgment. A woman's worth cannot always be measured in the children she bears. That evening, as autumn's first cool breeze rustled through the garden, Seo-yoon sat alone, by the small pond where lotus flowers were beginning to close for the night. She unfolded a letter that had arrived separately from the royal proclamation, a message from a merchant ship recently returned from Hangzhou. Jiho has established himself well among the Chinese merchants. The letter read. His trading house flourishes. However, rumors speak of illness that has followed him there. Fevers that leave him weakened, recurring with each change of season. The local physicians have no cure. So-yoon pressed the letter to her chest, conflicting emotions washing over her. Part of her, the wounded, abandoned wife, whispered that this was justice. But the larger part, the healer who had emerged during the epidemic, thought only of remedies that might help him. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Seo-yoon made another decision. She would compile her knowledge, everything she had learned during the epidemic, every effective treatment, into a detailed manuscript. And she would send it to Hangzhou on the next trading ship. Whether Jiho used it or not would be his choice. But she would not withhold healing out of pride or hurt, even from the man who had cast her aside. This, she realized, was the person she had become in his absence. Stronger, more certain of her worth, and guided by compassion rather than convention. Jiho stood at the window of his private chamber, watching snowflakes dance in the wind. Despite the 3 braziers warming the room, he couldn't stop shivering. His reflection in the glass revealed a man changed, thinner, with shadows beneath his eyes that never quite disappeared. A gentle knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called, his voice lacking its former authority. His most trusted advisor, Sung-min, bowed as he entered. "Lord Jiho, the physician has arrived." Jiho turned, resignation evident in his posture. "Another physician? I've seen a dozen already." "This one is different," Sung-min insisted. "He studied at the Imperial Academy and has treated court officials. More importantly, he's familiar with your symptoms." Jiho sighed, gesturing for the physician to be admitted. What followed was yet another examination, yet another recitation of his symptoms. Recurring fevers that left him drenched in sweat, a persistent heaviness in his chest, fatigue that reduced even the simplest tasks to monumental efforts. The physician, an elderly man with keen eyes, produced several packets of herbs from his case. "This illness is stubborn but not incurable," he stated confidently. "These remedies should provide relief, though the complete treatment requires specific preparations." Jiho had heard such promises before. "And what makes your remedies different from the others I've tried?" The physician smiled slightly. "These formulations come from a recent medical text, quite revolutionary in its approach to persistent fevers. The manuscript arrived from Korea last autumn and has caused quite a stir in medical circles." Jiho's attention sharpened. "From Korea?" "Indeed. A noblewoman compiled extensive observations during an epidemic. Her treatments saved hundreds of lives, including members of your royal family. I understand. The text bears her seal. The compassionate lady of the realm, she's called." A strange sensation rippled through Jiho's chest, something beyond his illness. "This noblewoman, does she have a name?" "Lady Seo-yoon of the House of Kim," the physician replied, watching Jiho's reaction with interest. "You share the family name. A relation, perhaps?" Jiho turned back to the window, struggling to maintain his composure. "My wife," he said at last, the words barely audible. Later that night, as the prescribed medicine brought the first real relief he'd experienced in months, Jiho summoned Sung-min again. "Tell me everything you know about what's happened at home during our absence," he demanded. "Every detail about my wife and her activities." Sung-min hesitated. "We receive regular reports on business matters, but personal news." "Then find it," Jiho interrupted, a new urgency in his voice. "I want to know exactly how my wife transformed from a quiet, obedient bride into a celebrated healer whose work has reached even Hangzhou's imperial physicians." Over the following weeks, as Jiho's health gradually improved under the regimen from Seo-yoon's manuscript, reports arrived from Korea. Each account further illuminated the remarkable journey of the woman he had abandoned. How she had established a hospital during the epidemic when all others fled. How she had personally treated scores of patients, including his own mother. How she had been honored by the king himself and now advised the royal physicians. The estate has prospered under her guidance, Sungmin reported during one such briefing. The royal land grant has been planted with medicinal herbs that fetch high prices. Lady Seoyun has opened a school where young women learn basic healing arts. And my mother permits this? Jiho asked, incredulous. According to our sources, Lady Kim has become one of your wife's staunchest supporters. The epidemic changed many things, my lord. Jiho absorbed this information in silence. The woman described in these reports bore little resemblance to the meek bride he had left behind. Or perhaps, he was beginning to realize, he had never truly seen Seoyun at all. As strength returned to his body, resolution formed in his mind. When spring arrived, bringing the first plum blossoms to Hangzhou's gardens, Jiho made his announcement. They would return to Korea. The journey home was arduous, particularly for someone still recovering from prolonged illness. As Korean shores finally appeared on the horizon, Jiho stood at the ship's rail, his heart pounding with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Fear, perhaps, or something closer to shame. Have notifications been sent ahead? He asked Sungmin, who stood nearby. Yes, my lord. The household will be prepared for your arrival. Jiho nodded, then asked the question that had haunted him for weeks. And my wife? Will she be there? Sungmin's expression remained carefully neutral. The message was delivered to the main house. Whether Lady Seoyun chooses to welcome you herself, that I cannot say. The harbor appeared much as it had when he departed, though Jiho viewed it now through changed eyes. A formal reception committee waited on the docks. Business associates, extended family members, estate officials, but his focus instantly went to the two figures standing slightly apart from the others. His mother, looking older but surprisingly vital, and beside her, Seoyun. Even from a distance, the transformation was evident. She stood straight-backed and serene, dressed not in the elaborate silks of a merchant's trophy wife, but in the simpler, elegant attire of a respected scholar. Her hair was arranged without excessive ornament, and she wore no visible cosmetics. Yet she commanded attention through presence alone. As Jiho descended the gangplank, the crowd parted. He approached his mother first, as propriety demanded, and bowed deeply. Mother, I am gratified to see you well. Lady Kim reached for his hands, examining him with worried eyes. The journey has taxed your strength. We should return to the estate quickly so you can rest. In a moment, Jiho replied, then turned to face his wife. For 2 years, he had carried a memory of Seoyun, a composite of resentment, guilt, and fading affection. The woman before him now shattered that image completely. Her eyes met his directly, neither subservient nor accusatory, but clear and assessing. Lord Jiho, she said, her voice steady. Welcome home. He bowed, lower than protocol required. Lady Seoyun, I am honored by your presence. A small crowd had gathered around them, eager to witness this reunion. Seoyun seemed to sense his discomfort. The palanquin is prepared, she said, gesturing toward an ornate conveyance nearby. The physician I've consulted advises against excessive exertion during your recovery. You've consulted a physician? Already? Jiho asked, surprised. A hint of a smile touched her lips. I consulted several once I learned the nature of your illness. Your chamber has been prepared with appropriate remedies and accommodations. The journey to the estate passed in uncomfortable silence. Jiho found himself stealing glances at his wife, searching for glimpses of the timid young woman he had married. But that person seemed to have vanished entirely, replaced by this composed, confident stranger who bore his family name yet seemed to inhabit a world apart from him. Upon their arrival, servants approached with practiced efficiency, directing his belongings to his chambers and offering refreshments. Jiho noticed immediately how they deferred to Seoyun, seeking her approval with their eyes before proceeding. You run a tight household, he commented as they entered the main hall. Efficiency serves everyone's interests, she replied simply. His mother excused herself to rest, leaving them momentarily alone in the hall where, 2 years earlier, he had publicly humiliated her before his departure. The memory hung between them, unacknowledged but palpable. You must be tired as well, Seoyun observed. I'll have dinner sent to your chambers. As she turned to leave, Ji-ho found his voice. Seo-yoon, please wait. She paused, her back still to him. The manuscript you sent to Hangzhou, he said quietly. It saved my life. The physicians there had given up hope before your treatments arrived. She turned slowly to face him. I'm glad they proved effective. You knew I was ill? Before you sent it. I received reports of your condition. It seemed similar to cases I had treated here. Ji-ho took a step toward her. Why? After the way I left. After what I said to you in this very hall. Why would you help me? For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed her composed features. Something complex and unreadable. Healing isn't just for those who deserve it, Lord Ji-ho. It's for all who need it. The formality stung more than accusation would have. I deserved far worse from you than healing. Seo-yoon studied him for a long moment, as though seeing past his physical appearance to something deeper. Perhaps, but vengeance and healing cannot occupy the same hand. I chose healing for others, and eventually, for myself. And for me, is there healing possible between us? Her expression softened slightly, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability beneath the composed exterior. That depends on what illness you believe afflicts us. Before he could respond, she continued, Rest now. You're still weak from the journey. We have time for difficult conversations later. As she walked away, her footsteps measured and dignified, Ji-ho felt something unexpected stir within him. Not the possessive desire he had once felt for his beautiful bride, nor the resentment that had festered during their separation, but something closer to respect, tinged with regret for all he had failed to see. That night, alone in chambers that felt strangely unfamiliar despite being his own, Ji-ho unpacked a small wooden box he had brought from Hangzhou. Inside lay Seo-yoon's medical manuscript, the pages worn from constant reference during his illness. He traced her elegant brushstrokes with his fingertip, recognizing for the first time the formidable mind behind them. I never knew you, he whispered to the empty room. I never even tried. Outside, spring rain began to fall gently, washing away winter's last traces. Somewhere in another wing of the house, Seo-yoon prepared for sleep as well, equally solitary, equally thoughtful. Between them lay not just physical distance but a chasm of hurt and transformation that neither was certain could be bridged. Those interactions remained formal, confined largely to necessary discussions about household matters or his ongoing treatment. Each morning, Seo-yoon would visit his chambers briefly to check his progress, her manner professional and distant. Each evening, he would dine separately from her, though occasionally they would encounter one another in the gardens or library. It was during one such chance meeting, nearly a month after his return, that something shifted between them. Ji-ho had taken to walking the grounds as his strength returned, reacquainting himself with the estate that had changed subtly in his absence. New herb gardens flourished where ornamental plants once grew. A small building near the eastern wall had been converted into what servants called the Young Ladies' School, where Seo-yoon taught healing arts to selected students. It was there he found her one afternoon, sitting alone beneath a gnarled plum tree, surrounded by scrolls and botanical specimens. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice his approach until his shadow fell across her papers. You'll strain your eyes reading in this light, he said softly. Seo-yoon looked up, momentarily unguarded, and Ji-ho glimpsed something of the young woman he had married. Curious, intelligent, unbound by formality. Old habit, she replied, gesturing to the space beside her. Please sit if you wish. The physician said walking would strengthen you, but not if you exhaust yourself. Ji-ho lowered himself carefully onto the stone bench. You seem to know more about my treatment than I do. A small smile touched her lips. I should hope so. I designed it. Silence settled between them, less awkward than before. Ji-ho studied her face in profile as she returned to examining a dried plant specimen. The afternoon sun caught the subtle auburn highlights in her hair, and he noticed for the first time the delicate lines at the corners of her eyes, evidence of concentration rather than age. May I ask you something? He ventured. Of course. How did you begin your work as a healer? After I left. So-yoon carefully placed the specimen aside and turned to face him fully. Necessity, she said simply. 3 months after your departure, fever swept through the village. The local physician fell ill himself, and many were dying. But you had no training then. I had my father's library, she corrected. As a child, I often read his medical texts. Not that anyone knew. Girls aren't supposed to concern themselves with such matters. Her gaze turned distant, remembering. When servants from our estate began falling ill, your mother wanted to seal the house and wait out the epidemic. I disagreed. You disagreed with my mother? Ji-ho couldn't hide his astonishment. The timid bride he had left would never have dared. It surprised me as much as it did her, So-yoon admitted with a small laugh. But I knew the texts mentioned treatments that might help. I told her I would go to the servants' quarters myself if she wouldn't allow the physician to be called. She paused, absently tracing patterns on a scroll with her fingertip. I expected to be confined to my chambers for such insolence. Instead, she studied me for a long moment and said, "Then we shall both go." Ji-ho's eyes widened. My mother went to the servants' quarters during an epidemic? She did. And when we realized the physician was too overwhelmed to treat everyone, she watched as I began preparing remedies from my father's books. So-yoon's voice softened with the memory. The first night, 3 children recovered their fever broke. By the end of the week, your mother was announcing to anyone who would listen that her daughter-in-law had been blessed by the healing spirits. Ji-ho shook his head in wonder. The woman who once complained you weren't worthy of the Kim name. People change when faced with suffering, So-yoon said simply. Your mother lost her sister to fever as a child. She recognized that my knowledge could save lives. And from there, Ji-ho prompted, genuinely curious now. Word spread. More people came seeking help. I began recording which treatments worked best for different manifestations of the illness. When the royal family was affected, they summoned every known healer to the palace. She shrugged lightly. My remedies worked where others failed. The king was grateful. The understated way she described what must have been extraordinary events struck Ji-ho forcefully. This was the woman he had dismissed as insignificant, whose value he had measured only by her ability to bear him sons. I never gave you the chance to be anything but what I expected, he said quietly, the realization painful in its clarity. So-yoon regarded him steadily. No, you didn't. And yet you saved my life from across the sea. I would have done the same for any patient. But I wasn't just any patient, Ji-ho persisted. I was the husband who shamed you publicly, who threatened to replace you, who abandoned you. Yes, she acknowledged simply. You were. Her calm acceptance of these painful truths affected Ji-ho more deeply than tears or recriminations would have. He found himself speaking words he had rehearsed countless times during his slow recovery. I have no right to ask your forgiveness, So-yoon. What I did, what I said to you cannot be undone. But I want you to know that I recognize the man I was then as a fool. A prideful, ignorant fool who couldn't see the treasure before him. So-yoon's expression remained carefully neutral. And what do you want now, Ji-ho? The absence of his title in her address didn't escape his notice. It felt like the smallest possible opening, not forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of honesty between them. I want to know you, he said finally, not as the wife I thought I wanted, but as the woman you truly are, the healer, the scholar, the person I never allowed you to be in my presence. She studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face for deception. And if that woman isn't someone you can love, then I am poorer for it, he answered, simply. But I suspect that isn't the case. The faintest blush touched her cheeks, and she looked away toward the distant mountains. Your illness has made you philosophical. Near death tends to clarify one's thinking, he said wryly. But it wasn't just the illness that changed me. It was reading your work, seeing your mind on those pages, understanding the depth of knowledge I had dismissed because it came from a woman. He hesitated, then asked the question that had haunted him since discovering the source of his cure. Could you ever forgive me enough to start anew? Not as we were, but as something different. Something true. Seo-yoon gathered her scrolls methodically, her movements precise and thoughtful. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. Forgiveness isn't a single decision, Ji-ho. It's a path one walks daily. She turned to meet his gaze. I'm willing to begin that path. The destination, we shall have to discover together. She stood, balancing her materials in her arms. Join me for dinner tonight, not in the formal hall but in my study. I've been examining treatments for joint inflammation that might help your mother's condition. I'd value your perspective. The invitation, so simple yet so profound in what it offered. A glimpse into her world, her work, her mind, left Ji-ho momentarily speechless. He nodded, not trusting his voice. As she walked away, her steps light on the gravel path, Ji-ho remained seated under the plum tree. For the first time since his return, hope flickered genuinely in his chest. Not the desperate hope of the dying for cure, but the tentative hope of rebirth, of becoming something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. That evening, as lanterns glowed softly throughout the estate, Ji-ho approached Seo-yoon's study with an uncertainty he hadn't felt since his youth. He had dressed simply, forgoing the elaborate robes his position entitled him to wear. A servant announced his arrival, and the door slid open to reveal a room he had never entered before. Seo-yoon's private study was unlike any chamber in the house. One wall held floor-to-ceiling shelves of manuscripts and scrolls. Another displayed detailed botanical drawings, meticulously labeled in her precise handwriting. A low table near the center held not just the expected dinner settings but also various specimens and writing materials, as though meals and work flowed seamlessly together in this space. Seo-yoon herself knelt at the table, making notes on a scroll. She wore a simple hanbok of deep blue cotton, her hair bound casually at the nape of her neck. She looked up as he entered, and Ji-ho was struck by how completely at ease she appeared in this domain of her creation. "Welcome," she said, setting aside her brush. "Please sit." Ji-ho took his place across from her, noticing how the traditional arrangement had been subtly altered. They sat as equals at the table, neither in the position of honor. "This is where you work?" he asked, glancing around with undisguised curiosity. "My sanctuary," she confirmed, pouring tea for them both. "Your mother had it converted from an unused storage room when my medical scrolls began overtaking my sleeping chamber." Ji-ho accepted the tea with a slight bow. "Another surprise. I remember her strict insistence on proper feminine pursuits. She still insists I maintain perfect embroidery skills," Seo-yoon said with a small smile. "But she's discovered that a daughter-in-law with royal connections has certain advantages worth the scandal of unconventional interests." As servants brought in the meal, Ji-ho noticed another departure from tradition. Rather than the elaborate presentation meals usually received in his household, the food was simple, nourishing, clearly selected with therapeutic purpose. "You're still treating me," he observed, recognizing several ingredients from his prescribed remedies. "Until you're fully recovered," she agreed. "The lung infection you contracted is stubborn. Residual weakness could persist for months without proper care." They ate in companionable silence for several minutes before Ji-ho spoke again, his voice softer than before. "I've been wondering something since my return. Did you ever receive my letters?" Seo-yoon's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. "Letters? I wrote to you, monthly at first, then less frequently as the illness worsened and no replies came." He studied her surprised expression. "I take it they never arrived." She set down her utensils carefully. "No, I received no correspondence from you after your departure." A bitter understanding passed between them. "My mother," Ji-ho said flatly. "Perhaps," Seo-yoon acknowledged. "Though in fairness, she may have believed she was protecting me from further hurt." "What did they say? These letters that never reached me?" Ji-ho considered deflecting the question, but honesty had become precious between them. "The early ones were not kind. I wrote of business successes, of proving my worth without an heir, things meant to wound rather than heal. He looked down at his bowl, shame coloring his features. Later, as illness began to take hold, they changed. I wrote of regret, of dreams where I returned home to find you gone, of fears that I had sacrificed something precious for empty pride. Seo-yoon's expression softened almost imperceptibly. And would you have returned, had the illness not forced your hand? I believe I would have, he said after a moment's reflection, though perhaps too late for it to matter. Pride is a difficult master to abandon. The meal continued, their conversation turning to safer topics, the management of the estate, changes in the village, the progress of her students. Yet something had shifted subtly between them. A door opened that had long been sealed shut. As the evening drew to a close, Seo-yoon showed him her latest work, detailed documentation of fever patterns and corresponding treatments, organized more systematically than any medical text he had seen before. This is remarkable, he said, genuinely impressed. Have you shared this method with other physicians? Some, she replied, though many male practitioners are reluctant to adopt techniques developed by a woman. Ji-ho looked up from the manuscript. What if they weren't presented as coming from a woman? What if the Kim Trading Company began distributing these texts throughout the region, backed by my authority? Surprise flashed across her features. You would do that? It seems the least I could do, given how many lives might be saved. He hesitated before adding, we could work together. Your knowledge, my connections. A true partnership. The word hung between them, laden with meaning beyond business arrangements. As he prepared to take his leave, Ji-ho paused at the door. Thank you for this evening, for beginning the path. Seo-yoon stood just inside her sanctuary, partially illuminated by lantern light. Tomorrow, she said quietly, would you like to see the school? The students would benefit from understanding the business aspects of medicine, which herbs are costly, which preparations might be made more accessible to common people. The invitation represented more than a simple tour. It was an offering of her world, a tentative step toward the partnership he had proposed. I would be honored, he replied, bowing lower than propriety required. The school had flourished with Ji-ho's support. What began as Seo-yoon's small initiative to train young women in basic healing had expanded to include classes on business management and herb cultivation. Ji-ho had converted part of his trading company's warehouse into a dispensary where Seo-yoon's medicines could be distributed to those in need. It was there, amid the fragrant bundles of drying herbs and neatly labeled jars, that a messenger found them one sweltering afternoon. They had been inventorying supplies together, Seo-yoon's skilled hands separating quality specimens from those too degraded for use, Ji-ho recording quantities and calculating what must be ordered for autumn. Master Kim, the messenger said with a deep bow, the royal secretary has sent word. Your presence is requested at the palace 3 days hence. Both you and Lady Kim are summoned to attend the king's birthday celebration. Ji-ho and Seo-yoon exchanged glances. A royal summons could not be refused, yet they had carefully avoided public appearances together since his return. Their relationship, still tender in its reconstruction, had been nurtured in private, away from the scrutiny and gossip that had once wounded them both so deeply. We shall attend, Ji-ho replied formally, dismissing the messenger with appropriate compensation. When they were alone again, Seo-yoon continued her work, though her movements had lost their earlier fluidity. The entire court will be there, she said quietly. Ji-ho set down his ledger. Yes, the same nobles who witnessed. Yes, he said again, more gently this time. The same nobles who saw me shame you. The same ones who whispered behind fans about your barrenness and my departure. Seo-yoon carefully placed a sprig of wormwood on the sorting table. We have not discussed how we will present ourselves to society, what we are to each other now. Ji-ho moved closer, careful to maintain the respectful distance they had established these past months. Close enough for private conversation, yet not so near as to pressure or presume. What would you like us to be? He asked. She looked up at him then, her dark eyes steady despite the vulnerability of the question. I don't know if I can be what society expects of your wife. A demure shadow who produces airs and never speaks in public. That woman doesn't exist anymore, if she ever did. I'm not asking you to be that woman, Jiho said. I'm asking what you want for us, beyond society's expectations. So-yoon was silent for a long moment, the sounds of the busy dispensary continuing around them. Assistants grinding herbs, apprentices receiving instructions, customers waiting patiently for remedies. I want a true partnership, she said finally. One where my work has value equal to yours. Where decisions are shared, not commanded. Where? She hesitated, then continued with quiet firmness. Where intimacy grows from respect, not duty. The word intimacy hung between them like fragrant smoke. Potent, impossible to ignore, yet difficult to grasp. In the months since his return, they had built a bridge of mutual respect and growing affection, but physical distance had remained a necessary boundary. Jiho had not presumed to enter her private chambers, nor had he expected her to resume wifely duties in his. All that you've described, that is what I want as well, he said softly. But the court will expect traditional appearances. They will question if we do not behave as husband and wife should. Then let them question, So-yoon replied, surprising him with her directness. We know what we are building, Jiho. Their understanding is not required for our happiness. Something in her confidence ignited a matching certainty in him. He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. An invitation, not a demand. Then we will face them together, partners in truth, if not yet in the fullness of marriage. So-yoon regarded his outstretched hand for a heartbeat before placing her smaller one atop it. A gesture that felt more intimate than any they had shared before. Together, she agreed. The palace gleamed with 1,000 lanterns on the night of the celebration. Its grand courtyards transformed by silk pavilions and elaborate floral arrangements. Nobles and officials from every province crowded the vast reception area, their finest silks creating a sea of color that rippled with each movement and whispered conversation. Jiho and So-yoon arrived in the formal palanquin bearing the Kim family crest. She wore an exquisite hanbok of deep crimson with gold embroidery, a gift from Jiho that she had initially hesitated to accept but now wore with quiet dignity. Her hair had been arranged by the most skilled attendant in their household, adorned with the jade pins that had been part of her wedding trousseau. Jiho himself cut an imposing figure in formal robes of midnight blue patterned with silver threads. The illness had left him leaner than before, but the months of recovery had restored a healthy vigor to his bearing. Together, they made a striking couple, something immediately noticed as they stepped into the crowded courtyard. The whispers began instantly, passing from one guest to another like wind through summer grass. Is that truly Lady Kim? Standing beside her husband? I thought he had abandoned her. They say he returned only because he was dying. She saved his life with foreign medicines. No children still. Perhaps that's why he looks so grim. Jiho felt So-yoon tense slightly beside him as the murmurs reached their ears. Without thinking, he placed his hand gently at the small of her back, a gesture of support rather than possession. Remember, he said quietly, they see only what they expect to see. We know the truth. Her answering smile was small but genuine. The truth that you returned half-dead and insufferably stubborn. The teasing lightness in her voice, so rare and precious, eased the tension between them. Jiho laughed softly. Precisely that truth. They made their formal greetings to the king and queen, accepting the sovereign's thanks once again for So-yoon's medical assistance during the epidemic. As they moved through the gathering, Jiho maintained his position at So-yoon's side, rather than joining the groups of men discussing politics and trade as would have been customary. This unusual behavior did not go unnoticed, particularly by Lord Choi, whose daughter had once been suggested as a potential second wife for Jiho before his departure to China. Master Kim, Lord Choi said, approaching with calculated cordiality. What a pleasure to see you restored to health. We had heard the most alarming reports of your condition. Lord Choi, Jiho acknowledged with a formal bow. Yes, I was fortunate. My wife's medical knowledge proved more effective than anything the physicians in Hangzhou could provide. Lord Choi's gaze slid to Xiao Yun, assessment barely disguised as politeness. Indeed? How fortunate. Though one might wonder if a woman's proper place is truly among herbs and potions rather than managing her household. Jiho felt Xiao Yun stiffen beside him, but was surprised when she spoke before he could respond. I find that proper places can be limiting, Lord Choi, she said, her voice soft yet perfectly audible. The epidemic taught us that survival often depends on stepping beyond them. Lord Choi's eyebrows rose fractionally. You speak quite directly for a young woman. She speaks with the authority of someone who saved countless lives, including members of the royal family. Jiho interjected smoothly. The king himself has recognized her contributions. Yes, so I've heard, Lord Choi replied, his tone suggesting this was not entirely complimentary. And yet, Master Kim, surely you must be concerned with more traditional matters. Your family line, for instance. The Kim legacy requires heirs, does it not? The question, deliberately pointed, deliberately cruel, landed between them like a stone dropped in still water. In their months of rebuilding trust, the issue of children had remained largely unaddressed, a territory too fraught with past pain to explore. Jiho felt rather than saw Xiao Yun's minute withdrawal, the slight physical recoil that spoke of old wounds reopened. Before he could formulate a response that would end the conversation without further damage, an unexpected voice joined their circle. Ah, Lord Choi, still concerning yourself with other families' affairs, I see. Lady Kim, Jiho's mother, approached with the imperial bearing that had intimidated generations of servants and relatives alike. She took her place beside Xiao Yun, an unprecedented show of solidarity. Mother, Jiho said with genuine surprise, I didn't realize you had decided to attend tonight and missed the opportunity to remind certain individuals of their proper place? Lady Kim said, fixing Lord Choi with a glacial smile. I think not. Lord Choi bowed stiffly. Lady Kim, I meant no offense. I was merely expressing concern for your family's continuance. Your concern is noted and unnecessary, Lady Kim replied. The Kim family's legacy will be determined by the Kim family alone. She turned slightly towards Xiao Yun. My daughter-in-law and I were just about to view the garden exhibition. The royal peonies are particularly magnificent this evening. With that masterful dismissal, she led Xiao Yun away, leaving Jiho to conclude the conversation with Lord Choi as gracefully as circumstances allowed. Your mother has become quite the defender of your wife, Lord Choi observed, unable to entirely mask his curiosity. Jiho watched the two women move through the crowd, his mother's hand placed proprietarily on Xiao Yun's arm. My mother recognizes value where it exists, Lord Choi, as do I. Later, as musicians played beneath the pavilion and couples moved through the formal patterns of traditional dance, Jiho found Xiao Yun standing alone near a flowering cherry tree, partially hidden from the main celebration. Are you well? He asked, keeping a respectful distance. Yes, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Your mother was surprisingly fierce in her defense. She has come to value you greatly, Jiho acknowledged, though I suspect she also enjoyed the opportunity to put Lord Choi in his place. There is a decades-old rivalry there that predates both of us. Xiao Yun nodded absently, her gaze fixed on the distant dancers. The silence between them stretched, filled with unspoken thoughts. His question, Jiho finally said carefully, about heirs. It was inevitable someone would ask. Yes, but I regret that it happened so publicly and so crudely. So Yun turned to face him fully then, her expression composed but serious. We cannot avoid this conversation forever, Jiho. I know that despite everything that has changed between us, this remains unresolved. Jiho stepped closer, lowering his voice to ensure their privacy. What I want to say cannot be said here, but I would speak with you tonight when we return home, if you would permit it. Something in his tone must have conveyed the importance of his request, for Xiao Yun studied his face intently before nodding. I will receive you in my chambers after the household has retired. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of diplomatic conversations and formal observances. Jiho found his attention repeatedly drawn to Seo-yoon across crowded rooms, noting how she spoke with quiet authority to the royal physician, how she gracefully deflected invasive questions from curious noblewomen, how she carried herself with a dignity that had nothing to do with social position and everything to do with inner certainty. When they finally departed, the night air had cooled to a pleasant respite from summer's heat. In their palanquin, traveling through darkened streets toward home, they sat in companionable silence, the events of the evening settling around them like fine dust after a storm. The household had long since quieted when Jiho approached Seo-yoon's chambers. He had changed from his formal robes into simpler attire, and had spent the intervening time in careful contemplation of what he needed to say. Words he had rehearsed countless times during his months of recovery, but had never found the right moment to express. Her attendant admitted him without comment, a sign of how much had changed in their household. Months earlier, such a late-night visit would have sparked immediate gossip and speculation. Now, the staff had grown accustomed to their unconventional relationship, accepting that the master and his wife had established their own customs. Seo-yoon sat at her writing table, hair unbound and flowing over shoulders covered by a simple night robe. She had been writing in her medical journal, a nightly ritual he had come to understand was essential to her work. She set her brush aside as he entered, gesturing to the cushion across from her. "Would you like tea?" she offered. "No," he said, settling himself carefully. "What I have to say requires no softening." Something in his tone caused her to look at him more intently. "You seem troubled." "Not troubled," Jiho corrected. "Determined. Tonight reminded me how easily others can intrude upon what is sacred between two people. I don't want to allow that any longer." He took a deep breath, steadying himself for words that would change everything between them, one way or another. "Before my illness, I believed a man's worth was measured by his accomplishments and his legacy. Wealth accumulated, sons produced, respect commanded. I treated our marriage as another acquisition, and when it didn't yield the heir I expected, I considered it a failure." Seo-yoon remained still, her face composed but her eyes revealing the pain these memories evoked. "When I lay dying in Hangzhou," Jiho continued, "I didn't think of business contracts or family names. I thought of one moment. Do you remember the day after our wedding? When we walked in the garden at dawn. You stopped to watch a butterfly emerge from its chrysalis. And your face, the wonder in your expression." He shook his head slightly. "I had never seen anything so beautiful. And instead of treasuring that beauty, I spent years trying to force it into shapes determined by others." He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. "I don't want an heir, Seo-yoon. I want you, your mind, your heart, your companionship. If children come, they will be welcomed with joy. If they don't, our lives will still be complete because we have each other." Tears gathered in Seo-yoon's eyes, though she didn't allow them to fall. "You say this now," she whispered. "But what about a year from now? 5 years? When your mother is gone and there is no one to carry the Kim name? Then the Kim name will end with honor, having produced one final generation that valued truth above tradition." He reached across the table, his hand open in invitation. "I've had my second chance at life, Seo-yoon. I don't want to waste it chasing shadows when the substance of happiness is right before me." A single tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. "I want to believe you." "Then believe this," Jiho said softly. "I love you, not for what you can give me, but for who you are. The courage that faced down an epidemic. The mind that created treatments no one else imagined. The heart that sent healing across the sea to a man who had wronged you." He had never spoken these words to her, not during their courtship, not during their marriage. The declaration hung in the air between them, transforming the space into something new and undefined. Seo-yoon's hand trembled slightly as she finally placed it in his. "I protected myself against everything except those words," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I told myself I could accept a marriage of respect and partnership. That I didn't need. Love," Jiho finished for her. "Yes," She looked down at their joined hands. I feared loving you again. The pain when you left. I know, he said, his thumb gently caressing her knuckles. And I cannot erase that pain. But I swear to you, Seo-yoon, by everything I hold sacred, I will spend every day making sure you never feel it again. She raised her eyes to his, searching his face for any trace of insincerity or hesitation. Finding none, she slowly rose from her cushion, still holding his hand, and moved around the table until she stood before him. Then stand, she said softly. Stand and make that vow properly as my husband. Jiho rose to his feet, their hands still joined between them. In the gentle lamplight, they faced each other not as master and wife, but as equals choosing their path forward. I, Kim Jiho, take you as my true wife, not by arrangement or tradition, but by choice and love. I vow to honor your mind, cherish your heart, and walk beside you rather than before you, from this day until my last. The formal words, spoken with quiet intensity, filled the room like incense. So-yoon's eyes shimmered with tears as she responded with her own vow. I, Lee Seo-yoon, accept you as my husband in truth as well as name. I choose to love you not out of duty but desire, to share my life with you in equal partnership, from this night forward. The distance between them, physical and emotional, had never seemed so small, yet neither moved to close it completely. Years of pain and months of careful rebuilding had brought them to this threshold, but the final step required mutual courage. May I stay with you tonight? Jiho asked, his voice rough with emotion. Not to claim rights or fulfill obligations, but simply to be near you? In answer, Seo-yoon reached up and extinguished the lamp beside them, plunging the room into darkness relieved only by moonlight filtering through paper windows. Then, with gentle decisiveness, she guided him toward the sleeping mat that had known only her solitary presence since his departure years before. As they settled beside each other in the darkness, bodies close but not yet touching, So-yoon whispered words that completed the journey they had begun. Welcome home, Jiho. His hand found hers in the moonlight, fingers intertwining with a rightness that transcended physical desire. Tonight was for reconnection of hearts long separated. Tomorrow would bring the deeper intimacies their renewed vows had promised. Outside, summer winds carried the fragrance of night-blooming flowers through the estate. Within Seo-yoon's chambers, two people who had been joined by arrangement, separated by pride, and reunited by necessity finally found the rarest of achievements. A marriage transformed into a love freely chosen, eyes wide open to both flaws and virtues, past and future embraced with equal courage. Their legacy would not be measured in sons born or wealth accumulated, but in lives saved through their partnership, knowledge shared with future generations, and the quiet revolution of a love that dared to redefine tradition without rejecting its beauty. The Kim estate had transformed alongside its master and mistress. What was once primarily a merchant's home had become a center for healing and learning. The Eastern Wing now housed an expanded medical school where women from across the province, and increasingly, from neighboring regions, came to study under Seo-yoon's guidance. The trading company's networks, once focused solely on silk and porcelain, now facilitated the exchange of medical knowledge and rare healing ingredients from lands as distant as India and Arabia. Jiho stood at the entrance to the main hall, observing the organized commotion before him. Students in practical blue robes moved purposefully between classrooms and the medicinal garden. Scribes carefully copied Seo-yoon's medical texts. Her comprehensive work on epidemic fevers had now been translated into 3 languages and was being studied as far away as the imperial court in Japan. Messengers arrived with scrolls bearing official seals, requesting consultations or delivering reports from physicians who had implemented her methods. Watching again instead of working? So-yoon's voice carried a note of affectionate teasing as she approached from behind, her footsteps nearly silent on the polished wooden floor. Jiho turned, still marveling at how the sight of her could affect him after all these years. She wore the practical robes she had adopted for teaching, her hair arranged simply and secured with silver pins rather than elaborate ornaments. Yet to his eyes, she had never been more beautiful than she was now. Confident in her purpose, her face animated by the intelligence and compassion that had healed not only his body but his soul. "I was thinking," he replied, taking her hand naturally, "that my father would not recognize what his house has become." Seo-yoon's expression softened. "Would he approve, do you think?" Ji-ho considered this for a moment. "No," he said honestly, "not at first. But I believe he would have come to understand, as your father-in-law did." The mention of Lady Kim brought a small smile to Seo-yoon's face. The formidable woman had, against all expectations, become her most vigorous defender. Before her passing 2 winters ago, she had shocked society by publicly declaring that Seo-yoon's medical school would be her greatest legacy, far more valuable than any grandchild could have been. "We've received another request from the palace," Seo-yoon said, holding up a sealed scroll. "The queen's younger sister is with child and experiencing difficulties. They've asked if I would attend her for the final months." Ji-ho frowned slightly. "It would mean leaving just before the winter solstice. Your students' examinations. Min-ji can oversee them," Seo-yoon said, referring to her first and most accomplished student who now served as her assistant instructor. "The question is whether you would accompany me to the capital. The trade ministers have been requesting your presence regarding the new maritime regulations." "They can continue requesting," Ji-ho said firmly. "We agreed we travel together or not at all." This had become their practice over the years. Where once they had lived separate lives under the same roof, now they refused to be parted for significant periods. Business and healing journeys were coordinated so they could travel as one, their reputation as an inseparable pair becoming something of a legend in court circles. Seo-yoon squeezed his hand gently. "Then we shall inform the palace that the Kim household will arrive before the first snow." She hesitated before adding, "There's something else. The messenger brought news that may unsettle you." Ji-ho raised an eyebrow. "Oh, Lord Choi's son has taken a second wife," she said carefully. "The first failed to provide an heir after 7 years of marriage." A shadow passed across Ji-ho's features. Though they had found profound happiness together, this particular wound had never fully healed. Despite their renewed intimacy, Seo-yoon's womb had remained empty. They had come to accept this reality with grace, focusing instead on the many young lives they nurtured through their work. But occasionally, reminders of society's unyielding expectations still stung. "I see," he said quietly. "Did Lord Choi arrange the announcement to coincide with our invitation to court?" "It seems likely," Seo-yoon acknowledged. "He has never forgiven you for choosing me over his daughter as your second wife." Ji-ho's jaw tightened. He still doesn't understand, even after all these years. Seo-yoon led him away from the busy courtyard toward their private garden, a tranquil space where plum trees and carefully tended stone arrangements created a sanctuary from daily demands. Here they often retreated to discuss matters too personal for even trusted servants to overhear. When they were seated beside the small pond where red and white koi swam in lazy circles, Seo-yoon spoke with the directness that had become a hallmark of their relationship. "Does it still pain you?" she asked. "That we have no child?" Ji-ho looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "What pains me is that you might still doubt my contentment with our life. That Lord Choi or anyone else might make you question what we've built together." "I don't doubt you," she said softly. "But I know there are moments when you watch the children in the village and wonder what might have been." He couldn't deny this observation. His wife had grown skilled at reading the nuances of his expressions over the years. "Yes," he admitted. "Sometimes I wonder. But wondering is not the same as regretting, Seo-yoon. When I look at what our lives have become instead." He gestured toward the school buildings visible beyond the garden wall. "How many lives have your students saved? How many families remain intact because of knowledge you've shared? That is legacy far beyond what a single child could represent." Seo-yoon's eyes glistened slightly. "I've been keeping something from you," she said suddenly. "Something I wanted to be certain of before I shared it." Ji-ho felt a moment of alarm. "Are you unwell?" "No," she assured him quickly. "It concerns Song-min." Song-min was a boy of 9 years whose parents had died in a village fire the previous winter. With no living relatives, he had been brought to the Kim estate where Seo-yoon had treated his burns. During his recovery, the child had shown remarkable curiosity about medicine, often watching the students at their lessons and asking questions that revealed unusual intelligence. "What about him?" Ji-ho asked. "I've been teaching him privately," Seo-yoon explained. "His mind, Ji-ho, it's extraordinary. He grasps concepts that students twice his age struggle to understand. Yesterday, he correctly diagnosed a patient's liver complaint based solely on examining the tongue and pulse." Ji-ho smiled, unsurprised by her attachment to the boy. Seo-yoon had always shown particular kindness to orphan children, arranging apprenticeships or education for many over the years. "He's fortunate to have such a gifted teacher." "I wasn't finished," Seo-yoon said, an unusual hesitancy in her voice. "I've been thinking, we've been discussing what will happen to the school after us. Who will maintain the standards we've established? Who will continue expanding our knowledge rather than simply preserving it?" Ji-ho nodded, understanding her concern. Though Min-ji and several other advanced students showed promise as instructors, none possessed quite the combination of intellectual rigor and compassionate insight that had made Seo-yoon's approach so revolutionary. "You believe Song-min might be that person someday," he surmised. "I believe he could be more than that," Seo-yoon said, meeting his eyes directly. "I believe he could be our son." The words hung in the autumn air between them, laden with significance. Though they had provided for many children's education over the years, they had never taken the step of formal adoption, of bringing a child fully into their family as an heir. "You want to adopt him," Ji-ho said, not as a question but as recognition of a path his wife had already begun contemplating with characteristic thoroughness. "Only if you feel as I do," Seo-yoon replied. "This would be different from our other students. He would bear the Kim name, inherit not just our knowledge but everything we've built. He would represent our family before the world." Ji-ho was silent for a long moment, considering all the implications. An adopted son, particularly one of common birth with no notable ancestry, would face scrutiny and potential rejection from the upper echelons of society. Yet the boy would also inherit opportunities beyond anything he could have imagined in his former life. "Have you spoken to him about this possibility?" Ji-ho finally asked. "No. I wouldn't raise his hopes without your full agreement." Seo-yoon watched him carefully, adding, "I know this isn't the heir you once envisioned." Ji-ho reached across the space between them, taking her hands in his. "The heir I once envisioned was merely an extension of my own pride, a continuation of bloodlines and traditions I hadn't even questioned. But we've built something new together, Seo-yoon. Perhaps it's fitting that our heir should come to us in an equally unconventional way." Her face brightened with cautious hope. "Then you're open to considering it?" "More than open," he assured her. "But I would like to spend more time with the boy first. If he's to be our son in truth, not just in name, we should be certain the bond can grow in both directions." Relief and joy transformed Seo-yoon's expression. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead gently against his in a gesture of intimacy they had developed over years of partnership. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "Recognizing wisdom when I hear it." Ji-ho smiled, lifting one hand to caress her cheek. "You've never steered us wrong, my love. Not since the day you decided a dying merchant might be worth saving despite his stubborn pride." The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations for their journey to the capital. Between overseeing the trading company's quarterly accounts and ensuring the school would function smoothly in their absence, Ji-ho made time to observe Song-min. The boy showed not only the intellectual gifts Seo-yoon had described, but also a gentle temperament that masked surprising determination. On a crisp morning when frost outlined every leaf and stone in delicate white, Ji-ho invited the boy to accompany him on an inspection of the medicinal herb gardens. Song-min walked respectfully at his side, occasionally asking thoughtful questions about the business aspects of maintaining the school's supplies. "Master Kim," the boy said as they paused beside a bed of dormant ginseng plants, "may I ask something that might sound impertinent?" Ji-ho glanced down, curious. "You may. Why do you spend so much time helping with the school when you're a merchant?" The other students say most husbands wouldn't concern themselves with their wives' pursuits. The question, innocent yet penetrating, caught Jiho by surprise. He considered how to answer in a way the child might understand. "Do you see this garden, Song-min?" he asked, gesturing to the orderly rows extending before them. "Some might say the ginseng is the valuable part, it's what we sell, what brings profit. The soil is merely necessary, not valued in itself." The boy nodded, listening intently. "But a wise gardener knows better," Jiho continued. "Without properly tended soil, even the finest ginseng root will fail. And in time, without the nutrients the plants return to it, the soil itself would become barren." He knelt down, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. "Lady Kim and I are like the soil and the ginseng, different in nature, but each essential to the other's flourishing. I help with her school because her work nourishes mine, just as my trade networks help her knowledge spread beyond these walls." Song-min considered this carefully. "So you're partners?" Jiho smiled, impressed by the boy's quick understanding. "Exactly so, though it took us many years and much hardship to discover that truth." "The students say you were once very ill," Song-min said, his voice quieter now. "That Lady Kim saved your life with medicine others couldn't make." "She did," Jiho acknowledged, "though the greater healing came afterward, when she taught me to value what truly matters." Song-min's small face grew solemn. "My father used to say that a man who finds a wise wife should listen to her more than to 10 scholars. Your father sounds like he was a wise man himself," Jiho replied gently. "He was a woodcutter," Song-min said, a shadow of grief crossing his features. "But he could read and he taught me. He wanted me to become more than he was." Jiho felt something shift within his heart, a recognition of the boy's burden of lost possibilities, so similar to what he himself had once carried. "And what do you want to become, Song-min?" The boy looked up at him, eyes clear and direct. "I want to heal people like Lady Kim does, but I also want to make sure the medicines reach everyone who needs them, not just the wealthy." The answer, revealing both compassion and practical thinking, solidified something in Jiho's mind. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Those are worthy ambitions. Perhaps, when we return from the capital, we might discuss how you could pursue them further, as part of our family." Song-min's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "Do you mean?" "Nothing is decided yet," Jiho said carefully, not wanting to create premature expectations. "But Lady Kim and I have been considering whether you might wish to become our son in time. It would mean many responsibilities alongside the privileges." The boy stood very still, emotion washing across his face in waves. "I would try to be worthy," he whispered finally. "I believe you already are," Jiho replied softly. "Now come. We should return before Lady Kim sends someone to search for us. She worries when either of us is gone too long." As they walked back toward the main buildings, Song-min's small hand found its way into Jiho's larger one. The gesture, tentative yet trusting, awakened emotions Jiho had long suppressed. Not the desire for an heir that had once consumed him, but something deeper and more fundamental. The simple human need to guide a child toward the future, to pass on not just knowledge or wealth but values forged through hardship and wisdom earned through mistakes. The journey to the royal capital took 12 days, their procession of carriages and attendants moving steadily through landscapes transformed by autumn's glory. They traveled with an entourage befitting the Kim household's elevated status. Senior students to assist with the princess's care, trade representatives to support Jiho's negotiations, and servants to maintain the dignified appearance expected at court. Song-min had remained at the estate under Minji's watchful eye, though not without extracting promises of detailed letters describing everything they witnessed at the palace. The boy's enthusiasm had proven infectious, prompting Seo-yoon to pack extra journals specifically for recording observations he might find interesting. Their arrival at the capital coincided with the season's first snowfall, delicate flakes floating down upon the imposing palace walls and transforming the royal gardens into a crystalline wonderland. They were escorted immediately to their assigned quarters within the outer palace compound, a significant honor that reflected their current standing. The queen requests Lady Kim's presence in the inner palace tomorrow at the hour of the snake, announced the court official who had overseen their installation. Master Kim is invited to join the Trade Ministers' Council at the same hour. When they were finally alone in their chambers, Seo-yoon sank onto a cushioned bench, fatigue evident in the set of her shoulders. Ji-ho moved behind her, gently removing the pins from her hair and massaging her temples, an intimate ritual they had developed years ago. "You're worried about the princess," he observed. "The messenger's report was concerning," Seo-yoon admitted. "The symptoms suggest placenta previa. If that's the case, the delivery will be extremely dangerous." Ji-ho's hands stilled momentarily. Such complications had taken many women's lives, including his own mother during the birth of a younger sibling who had not survived infancy. "Can it be managed?" "Sometimes," Seo-yoon said cautiously. "I've developed techniques that improve the chances, but they require skilled assistance and precise timing. The palace will provide whatever you need," Ji-ho assured her, resuming his gentle massage. "Your reputation precedes you. Even the royal physicians will defer to your judgment." Seo-yoon leaned back against him, allowing herself a rare moment of vulnerability. "It's not just the princess I'm concerned about. I keep thinking of Song-min. If we've raised his hopes only to welcome him fully into our family when we return," Ji-ho interrupted firmly. "I spoke with him before we left. My heart is decided, Seo-yoon." She turned to face him, surprise and joy illuminating her features. "Truly? You're certain?" "Completely," he confirmed, taking her hands in his. "He has your compassion and my practicality. More importantly, he already holds a place in both our hearts. What better definition of a son could there be?" Tears gathered in Seo-yoon's eyes, tears not of sorrow but profound gratitude. "I never thought," she began, then shook her head slightly. "When we first married, I never imagined we would find this path together." "Nor did I," Ji-ho acknowledged, drawing her closer. "But that makes it all the more precious for being discovered rather than prescribed." They sat together in comfortable silence as snow continued to fall outside their window, each contemplating the unexpected journey that had brought them here, from strangers bound by arrangement, to estranged husband and wife, to partners in both work and heart, and now to potential parents united in purpose. "When we return," Seo-yoon said finally, "we should begin the formal adoption process immediately. Song-min should bear the Kim name before the spring festival." Ji-ho smiled, recognizing the decisive tone that indicated her mind was thoroughly made up. "I agree, and perhaps we should consider expanding our home to accommodate more such children in the future. There are many orphans with potential that goes unrecognized." Seo-yoon looked at him with surprise that quickly transformed into understanding. "You're thinking beyond Song-min, of creating a true legacy." "Our legacy," he corrected gently. "A family built on choice rather than obligation. A school that serves not just our province but the nation. Medical knowledge preserved and expanded for generations to come." "An ambitious vision," Seo-yoon observed, though her tone held approval rather than doubt. "I learned ambition from the woman who built a medical school from the ashes of epidemic," Ji-ho replied. "The woman who saw potential in a dying merchant who had lost his way." He pressed his forehead to hers in their private gesture of connection. "The woman who taught me that true legacy lies not in continuing what was, but in creating what could be." Outside their chambers, the palace bustled with preparations for the coming festivities. Within, two people who had once been strangers contemplated a future neither could have envisioned in their separate youths. A future where ancient traditions and new innovations would intertwine like the carefully balanced elements of Seo-yoon's most effective medicines. Morning would bring royal consultations and diplomatic negotiations, the weighty matters that had drawn them to the capital. But this moment, quiet, intimate, filled with shared purpose, contained the true treasure they had discovered together. The knowledge that life's greatest achievements often emerge not from the paths we plan to take, but from the unexpected journeys we have the courage to embrace when plans fail and new possibilities emerge from their ruins. Ji-ho found Seo-yoon in her laboratory, bent over a mortar where she was grinding rare cinnabar imported from distant mountains. Her sleeves were tied back, revealing the elegant line of her forearms as she worked the pestle with practiced precision. "A message from the palace," he said quietly, holding out the sealed document. She looked up, a small frown creasing her brow as she noticed his expression. "What is it?" "I don't know, but the messenger said it was urgent." Seoyun carefully set down her tools and wiped her hands on a cloth before taking the letter. The red seal cracked under her thumb as she opened it, her eyes scanning the formal script quickly. Ji-ho watched her face, noting how the color drained from her cheeks. "There's an illness in the royal nursery," she said, her voice suddenly professional, detached. "The crown prince's youngest child has fallen ill with symptoms the court physicians cannot identify. They're requesting my assistance immediately." Ji-ho felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. The royal nursery? But that would mean... Yes, So-yoon confirmed. "I would be treating a child of royal blood. The consequences if I fail." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The unspoken danger hung between them. Treating nobility was always a risk. Success meant temporary favor. Failure often meant permanent disgrace or worse. But treating royal children carried stakes exponentially higher. "I must go," Seoyun said, already moving to gather her essential supplies. "The child's condition is deteriorating rapidly." Ji-ho caught her hand gently. "We will go together." She looked up at him, surprise evident in her eyes. "Ji-ho, your position with the trading company, you're standing at court. If this goes poorly, you would be implicated in my failure. And if it goes well, I will share in your success." He replied with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "But neither outcome matters as much as standing beside you. We face challenges together now. Remember?" Seoyun's expression softened, the professional mask momentarily giving way to vulnerable gratitude. "Yes, together." The royal palace seemed less magnificent in daylight than it had during the celebration months before. Now, with purpose rather than ceremony guiding their steps, Ji-ho noticed the worn spots on stone stairs, the slight tarnish on decorative metalwork that servants couldn't quite keep polished. Even royalty couldn't escape the inevitable erosion of time. They were escorted not to the grand receiving halls but through smaller corridors to the private royal quarters. Guards stood at attention outside an ornate door, their expressions grim. From within came the sound that chilled the blood of any parent or healer, the weak, persistent crying of a seriously ill child. The royal physician himself met them at the threshold, his usual haughty demeanor replaced by unmistakable anxiety. "Lady Kim," he said, bowing stiffly to Seoyun. The gesture, however reluctant, acknowledged her expertise in a way that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Tell me everything," Seoyun said, already moving past him into the chamber. Ji-ho followed close behind, carrying her medicine chest. Inside, the opulence of the royal nursery stood in stark contrast to the scene unfolding. Despite the silk bedding and jade-inlaid furniture, the small figure lying on the bed could have been any child from any household. Flushed with fever, hair damp with sweat, tiny chest rising and falling with labored breaths. The crown prince himself sat beside the bed, his magnificent robes crumpled from hours of vigil. The child's mother, the crown princess, stood by the window, her face a mask of contained terror. For royal physicians hovered uncertainly around the room, their earlier confidence clearly shattered by whatever afflicted the young prince. Seoyun approached the bed and bowed deeply to the crown prince. "Your Highness, may I examine your son?" The prince's exhausted eyes fixed on her face. "Lady Kim, I've heard of your work during the epidemic. They say you saved many who would otherwise have perished." The desperate hope in his voice was unmistakable, the voice of a father, not a ruler. "I will do everything in my power for your son," Seoyun replied, her tone gentle but confident. Ji-ho watched as she began her examination, her movements sure and methodical despite the pressure of royal eyes upon her. She checked the child's pulse points, examined his tongue, listened to his breathing, and gently palpated his abdomen. The young prince, no more than 3 years old, whimpered in discomfort but did not resist her touch. How long has he been ill? She asked, addressing both parents. The crown princess stepped forward. 5 days. It began with mild fever and fatigue, but since yesterday, her voice broke. Since yesterday, he can barely stay awake, refuses all food, and his fever rises despite everything the physicians have tried. Seo-yoon nodded thoughtfully, continuing her assessment. And has anyone else in the royal household shown similar symptoms? The royal physician interjected. No, we've checked thoroughly. Only the young prince is affected. Ji-ho observed the room more carefully as Seo-yoon worked, noting details others might miss. His years of managing trading expeditions had taught him to look beyond the obvious, to find connections where others saw only chaos. The young prince's toys, he said suddenly. May I examine them? All eyes turned to him in surprise. The crown prince frowned slightly but nodded his permission. Ji-ho moved to a lacquered chest in the corner where elaborate toys were stored, wooden figurines, miniature horses with real horsehair manes, tiny replicas of palace buildings. He lifted each carefully, examining them with intense focus. These foreign dolls, he said, holding up an intricately carved wooden figure unlike any Korean craftsmanship. When did they arrive in the palace? The crown princess's eyes widened slightly. 6 days ago, a diplomatic gift from the southern islands. Our son was so delighted with them. Ji-ho brought the doll to Seo-yoon, who took it with a questioning look. She turned it over in her hands, then held it to her nose. There's a faint smell, she said quietly. And look, the paint on the face is slightly tacky to the touch, not fully cured. She looked up at the royal physician. I believe the child has been poisoned, not deliberately, but through toxic paints used on these foreign toys. The symptoms match those of cinnabar poisoning when the mineral is improperly processed. A hushed silence fell over the room. The royal physician stepped forward, skepticism warring with desperate hope on his face. Can you be certain? Seo-yoon met his gaze steadily. I work with these substances daily. The symptoms, the progression, they align perfectly. And more importantly, I know how to treat it. The crown prince rose from his seat. Then do so. Save my son. Ji-ho felt his chest tighten with both pride and fear as Seo-yoon opened her medicine chest and began measuring precise amounts of herbs and minerals into a small bowl. The weight of royal expectation pressed on them both like a physical force. I will need clean water, heated precisely to the temperature of bath water, not hotter, she instructed, authority clear in her voice. And I must administer this treatment myself, following exact intervals. For the next 3 hours, Ji-ho watched as Seo-yoon worked with unwavering focus, administering carefully calculated doses of her remedy, monitoring the child's responses, adjusting her approach with each subtle change in his condition. The royal parents and physicians watched in tense silence, hope and doubt visibly warring in their expressions. As sunset painted the palace walls with golden light, the young prince's fever broke. His breathing eased, and he fell into a natural, healing sleep rather than the insensible state that had frightened even the most experienced physicians. The crown princess wept openly, decorum forgotten in her relief. The crown prince placed a hand on Seo-yoon's shoulder, an unprecedented gesture of royal gratitude. Lady Kim, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I am in your debt. Seo-yoon bowed her head. Your Highness honors me too greatly. I am simply fortunate to have recognized the cause of the illness. Fortune favors the prepared mind, the prince replied, and you would not have recognized the source without your husband's insight. He turned to Ji-ho. You have both served the royal family today. This will not be forgotten. They returned to their home as lanterns were being lit along the streets, the night air crisp with autumn's promise. Neither had spoken much during the journey, both processing the enormity of what had transpired. Royal favor was as unpredictable as it was powerful, a double-edged sword that could elevate or destroy with equal ease. As their servants welcomed them home and hurried to prepare a late meal, Ji-ho finally broke the silence. You were magnificent today, he said softly, as they settled in their private quarters. I've never seen such composure under such pressure. Seo-yoon looked up at him, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath her eyes. We were magnificent. I would never have identified the source without your observation of the toys. We make a formidable partnership, he agreed, pouring her a cup of warm tea. More than a partnership, she corrected, accepting the tea with a small smile. A true marriage. Jiho sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched lightly. The crown prince mentioned debt. He will likely offer some form of royal recognition or reward. I don't want rewards, Seo-yoon said, leaning subtly against him. But I do have one request I would make, if truly we have earned royal favor. What would you ask for? Jiho was curious. In all their years together, he had never known Seo-yoon to request anything for herself. She set down her teacup and turned to face him fully. I want royal permission and funding to establish a medical academy for women. Not just a small school like we have now, but a true institution with the authority to grant credentials. A place where women with healing gifts can study openly, without shame or secrecy. Jiho's breath caught at the boldness of the vision. Such an institution would challenge centuries of tradition, upending the established order that kept women's knowledge confined to domestic spaces. Yet he could see it clearly, the natural evolution of everything they had built together. It would change everything, he said quietly. Yes, she agreed. But change is already here, Jiho. The question is whether we guide it or are swept away by it. He took her hands in his, feeling the slight calluses that spoke of her dedication, the strength in fingers that had saved countless lives, including his own. Then we will guide it together, he promised. Tomorrow I will draft a formal proposal to the crown prince. With royal patronage, not even the most conservative ministers would dare oppose it openly. Seo-yoon's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, not of sorrow but of hope long deferred. You truly support this? It will not be an easy path. When have we ever chosen the easy path? Jiho asked with a gentle smile. Besides, I find I've developed quite a taste for revolution. The quiet kind that changes hearts before anyone realizes their minds have been changed. She laughed softly, the sound washing away the tension of the day. A merchant's revolution, changing the world through careful negotiation rather than dramatic upheaval. And a healer's revolution, he added, curing society's wounds one patient at a time. Outside their window, autumn leaves danced on the night breeze, spinning in graceful spirals before settling on new ground. Inside, two people who had begun their journey as strangers bound by arrangement sat close together, no longer separated by misunderstanding or tradition. Their hands intertwined as they planned a future neither could have imagined alone. The royal summons that had arrived with such urgency that morning had set in motion possibilities that extended far beyond their lifetime. A legacy not of bloodline but of knowledge, not of power but of healing. As they sat together in comfortable silence, Seo-yoon and Jiho embodied the profound truth that the most significant transformations begin not with grand declarations but with simple choices. To see differently, to listen more deeply, to stand beside rather than above. Their story, once a common tale of arranged marriage and expected roles, had become something revolutionary precisely because they had dared to make it ordinary in its humanity, extraordinary in its honesty. They knelt together on cushions as the royal envoy unrolled the document with ceremonial precision. By decree of His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, the envoy intoned, Lady Kim Seo-yoon is hereby granted imperial patronage for the establishment of the Royal Women's Medical Academy. Land adjacent to the Eastern Palace will be allocated for construction, with funds from the royal treasury provided for buildings and equipment. Furthermore, graduates of this academy shall receive official recognition of their qualifications throughout all provinces. Jiho heard Seo-yoon's sharp intake of breath beside him. His own heart hammered against his ribs as the envoy continued reading. Additionally, Master Kim Jiho is appointed royal trade envoy to foreign lands, with authority to establish mercantile relationships in service to the new academy's needs for medical substances and knowledge. When the reading concluded, they both pressed their foreheads to the floor in formal gratitude. Only when the envoy departed with appropriate ceremony did they allow themselves to meet each other's gaze. It's happening, Seo-yoon whispered, her eyes bright with barely contained emotion. Not just permission, but royal patronage. Jiho reached for her hands, unmindful of the servants still present. You've done it. What generations of women healers could only dream of. You've made it real. She shook her head firmly. We've done it. My knowledge and your diplomacy. Neither could have succeeded alone. That evening, as lanterns illuminated their garden and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they sat together beneath the old plum tree, a flask of warm rice wine between them. The momentous news had left them both in a state of quiet wonder, too overwhelmed for grand celebrations. It won't be easy, Seo-yoon said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. The royal patronage will silence some opposition, but not all. There are many who will fight against women claiming such public authority. Jiho nodded, refilling her cup. Lord Min has already sent a message suggesting this afternoon's decree was precipitous. He hints that the crown prince might be persuaded to reconsider. And what did you reply? She asked, watching his face carefully in the golden lantern light. A small, dangerous smile played across Jiho's lips. That his considerable investment in northern timber might face unexpected taxation difficulties if he pursues such concerns. Seo-yoon's eyebrows rose. You threatened him? I merely pointed out connections he had overlooked, Jiho corrected mildly. The same way you might explain to a patient how different symptoms relate to one another. She laughed softly, the sound mingling with the evening breeze that rustled through the plum blossoms. We've both become rather dangerous, haven't we? Not in the ways our families might have expected. Speaking of family, Jiho said, his tone shifting to something more tentative, there's another matter we should discuss. Seo-yoon tilted her head questioningly. With the academy being established in the capital, we'll need to relocate there, at least for much of each year, he explained. And if I'm to serve as royal trade envoy, I'll be traveling more frequently to foreign ports. He paused, looking down at his cup before meeting her eyes again. I've been thinking about Songmin. What about him? Seo-yoon asked, though something in her expression suggested she already anticipated his thoughts. His formal adoption has been completed. He bears our name now, but with both of us taking on these new responsibilities. Jiho's voice trailed off, uncertain how to express his concerns. Seo-yoon set down her cup and moved closer to him, their shoulders touching comfortably. You're worried we'll replicate the mistakes of our own parents, ambition overshadowing attention. Yes, he admitted. The academy will demand your focus. My new position will take me away for months at a time. I don't want Songmin to feel he's secondary to our work. Then we must ensure he's part of it, Seo-yoon said with sudden clarity. Not an obligation we fulfill when our other duties allow, but integral to everything we build. Jiho considered this. What do you propose? Songmin accompanies us to the capital. He studies both medicine and trade, not because we demand it, but because he's shown aptitude for both. Her eyes brightened with growing conviction. And when you travel as royal envoy, he travels with you when appropriate. He learns languages, customs, sees the world beyond our borders. He's still young for such journeys, Jiho observed, though the idea appealed to him greatly. He'll grow quickly, Seo-yoon countered. And what better education than witnessing the founding of something that will outlast us all? We can teach him that purpose and family need not be opposing forces. Jiho smiled, reaching for her hand. You're right, as usual. I'll speak with him tomorrow about our plans. We'll speak with him, she corrected gently. Together. The morning brought unexpected news that shifted their carefully laid plans. A messenger arrived before dawn, his horse lathered with sweat from hard riding. He carried an urgent summons, not from the palace this time, but from the northern province where an outbreak of fever had already claimed dozens of lives in coastal fishing villages. The symptoms are unlike anything our local physicians have encountered, the messenger reported, kneeling before them in their receiving room, his travel-stained clothes evidence of his haste. The provincial governor begs Lady Kim's assistance before the contagion reaches more populated areas. Seo-yoon and Jiho exchanged a look heavy with unspoken communication. The royal decree establishing the academy had barely been announced. Construction in the capital would begin within weeks. Their presence, particularly Seo Yoon's, would be expected for countless decisions regarding design, curriculum, selection of instructors. And yet, people were dying. How far has it spread? Seo Yoon asked, already mentally cataloging which medicines and instruments she would need. 3 coastal.